Welcome all to the Mindtrek DXtera Impact of Open Technologies and Education event. This event is a program collaboration with DXtera Institute and the Finnish EduCloud Alliance and part of the Next Generation by Design series. My name is Timo Väliharju and I'm a chairman of EduCloud Alliance in Finland. I'm happy to start the conference and also tell you a few words about Finnish EduCloud Alliance. So we are a business-oriented alliance that is based on open technology, which is very important to us. We are aiming to build a nation-level ecosystem focusing on international awareness, which connects users, purchasers, developers, and service providers of learning services. And you can find more information from our website if you want to learn more. So next we will start with our esteemed keynote speaker, Dr. Anja Hagen, from the German Alliance of Education, Education 360 consulting company from Germany. And Anja is an independent consultant for digital transformation and education processes. She is an educational enthusiast, member of the extended board of Alliance for Education in Germany, and founder of 2 startups. Anja Hagen has learned to develop and publish educational media from the scratch. So I welcome you, Anja, and allow you to give your keynote presentation.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Timo, and thank you for this introduction. So I will share my screens. I hope you can see them. And I apologize a little bit for the title. It's meant ironically, taken over from behind, and a few slides further you will know what I mean by this title when I talk about the situation of open standards in Germany. First of all, I want to introduce the German Education of Alliance, the German Alliance of Education. Sorry, we see ourselves as the intersection, the combination between the education industry and the public sector in Germany. We have over 120 members from all parts of this education ecosystems, hardware and software providers, infrastructure providers, startups, edtech startups, publishers, and last not least, we have school administrations at our members. So we can always do a dialogue between the different perspectives, the different interests and different stakeholders. And we bring them together to discuss current challenges, to discuss them naturally, and to find solutions. That's our aim, yes. And we offer expertise to ministries, federal states, municipalities, and schools. And we develop also technical solution approaches, frameworks, etc. Not me, first of all, it's our managing director, Beth. I'm here to represent the German Alliance for Education, and Beth, she's in her, I don't know the word in English, but in Germany we call this mother holidays. So she became her second child, and so I'm here for her. As Timo said, I'm not a technical expert. I have a publisher background. I was managing director of a market-leading educational publisher in Germany, and now I'm an independent consultant, and I have 2 startups. So I knew this open standards from both sides. As a market-leading company, you hate standards. As a startup, you embrace them. So these are the different perspectives. But what I talk about is the German situation. And so you know why I set up this title, because the most people see German as a rich country. But when it comes to education, our spending is below the OECD average. Like Finland is spending 6.7% of his gross domestic product in education. Germany is only spending 4.2% of his gross domestic product in education. And so it's the situation in our education system. They are not well equipped digitally. We have no Wi-Fi coverage in all our educational institutions. Not all our students have a digital device. Teachers are poorly trained for digital training, digital teaching. And when it comes to the pandemic, not distance learning could not take place in all of our schools. So we have large learning deficits due to the pandemic, and our education system has come under great pressure. What does that mean for open technology? We have a collection and not a system. We have 16 different proprietary learning management systems in 16 federal states. We have separate systems in school, higher education, and vocational training, no national ID management, no standardized interfaces between open and commercial learning solutions. And privacy, you know, that is in Germany the very big issue. And it's more like a killer than like an enabler for the education system. So what could you do when you are so far behind? You could lay back and hope for a miracle, or you could take a brave step forward. And that's what I think that the German government does. So the Federal Ministry of Education launched in May the Digital Education Initiative. And maybe it is absolutely crazy what they did, or it's a bit of a genius, I don't know, and maybe only the history will tell us that. Because the centerpiece of this initiative is a national digital education platform as a meta platform. It's funded with 150 million euros. And what's very untypical in Germany that everybody can participate on that. They call for universities, companies, startups, associations, small and medium-sized businesses to participate in this funding program. At the moment, it is not a tender, it's a funding program. So when you're in a university, you will be funded with 100%. When you're a company, small or medium-sized, you will be funded by 55%. When you say, okay, I want to do one of these prototypes. What does that mean? It is a competition of solutions. Very, very untypical in Germany to do that. But I think the government says, okay, we are so far behind and we could not establish like a feature list. And we have not a full vision what this education platform could be. So they set up one project as a pilot. This is the National Education Area. And this pilot is like a test environment to test interoperability of the prototypes of the National Education Platform and the learning solutions and the teaching solutions. And the German Alliance of Education is very proud to be part of this pilot, this National Education Area, because it could be like a test system, and we could establish there a lot of standards to bring up this education infrastructure in Germany. The prototypes, there are two parts of prototypes you could develop. First of all, the National Education Platform as a prototype for the new interconnected service platform. They call for +4 prototypes. Then the digital teaching solutions. You can also call for more than 4 prototypes. And the only aim is that they support collaborative teaching. And the call for learning solution, also +4 prototypes. And there they only said you have to develop a modern learning path-oriented learning services. So all these prototypes should be developed in the next month, and they should test their standards, their interoperability against the National Education Area as a pilot. So this is the idea behind the National Education Meta platform. They want to bring together different parts of the education ecosystem. They want to bring together learners, teachers, institutions, and providers. And they have the idea that it should be a partner over the whole learning journey as a learner, from K-12 to vocational training. And they want to bring or interconnect all the different platforms, all the different solutions, all the different applications on this journey. And the only thing that should be part of this prototype is that it ensures identities that can use that these identities can be used in all of this area, one identity in all of these areas of this learning path. And it should use structured databases. It should use secure data exchange and data communication, and it should interconnection of different offerings. So they do not make a list of features. I've said that before. They have only design principles for this. And these design principles for this education platform are scalability, use of established data standards, use of documented APIs, adaptability, security, privacy, accessibility, reusability of concept and content, and data economy. These are the design principles. So it is up to all these companies, universities, edtech startups that join this funding program to bring up good ideas. And the ministry will look at these good ideas and will pick up the best features to build up their vision of the national education platform. So what are the next steps for this? The call for prototypes has been closed in the beginning of this month, and this prototype should be developed and made publicly available by the end of 2021. This is the time for the prototypes, for the platform and all the teaching and learning prototypes. And then the ministry selects best features and uses them to draw up specifications for a Europe-wide tender. And then the development should start at the beginning of 2023. And when you think about what will happen between the end of 2021 and the beginning of 2023, then you see that a Europe-wide tender will take 12 months to establish to do all the organizational stuff and then to do the tender itself. So for everybody in Europe, and maybe when you're outside of Europe but using a Europe database or Europe service, then you can do it also. You can join in this tender at the beginning of 2023. And I hope that this program will still be working then. We have change of government in the summer here in Germany, but this is a very, very, very bold idea. And as I said before, nobody knows in Germany if it's crazy or if it's genius. We don't know it. It's very untypical, and it is a very big issue in Germany at the moment for all the partners of the German Alliance of Education and all the partners in this ecosystem, because it could change a lot. And it could take us a very big step forward in an integrated, interoperable education ecosystem. So this is what I want to say about, I didn't take 20 minutes, but I think this is, I hope this is interesting for you, and I'm looking forward for your questions.
Thank you, Anja, for the very interesting presentation. I think that we have time for one or maybe two questions if the participants want to write chat some questions, and if not, we can also discuss later with other panelists and so on. All right, I have one question. What do you think about the future? How do you think that this kind of ends up in Germany? So as we all know that when you do these kind of a development project, it's always very difficult to implement those into the educational system. So what do you think about this?
That's a very good question. At the moment, I don't know if it could work. If it is too big, maybe it is too big, so it is too complicated to integrate the whole industry and the whole learning journey and all these different segments of the education system. But it is at the moment it is the answer to all our pains. So I hope that there will enough political will to do this and enough pressure from the society to that it will take results. And I hope that we as the association could bring together all these different perspectives and because at the moment it is it is thought with a very technical view, and I don't think that they heard enough the users, and they should have heard all these other things that are not inside this project at the moment, like licenses for all these the learning solutions from the companies, and so I think a little bit is missing. What I think about the future, I don't know. We will support this because I think it is a good thing. It is a good initiative, and it is. I'm very. I think in the autumn we know more, because then the first prototypes will be you could be aware of all these prototypes and see if there is something very, very different and interesting and with the impact to make a change.
Yeah. Jim Larimore from Reed Labs asked that, was there political opposition to the idea of creating a single national platform?
No, no political opposition. You must see that at the moment all the big solutions like Microsoft 365 they are not allowed in Germany anymore because of the privacy shield, and so it is the political will to bring the data under national shelter, and so this there is no opposition. There are only a lot of people are very skeptical about if this big plan could take place, but not a real opposition.
Yeah, all right. One more question. So what do you think about the international cooperation possibilities in the project and this mainly national effort?
Yeah, they designed it as a not only as a Europe-wide tender, but also as a Europe-wide initiative. So I think that there could be an international cooperation. We're in Germany not very good at looking at other countries for examples. We often think that we should do it our way, but when it comes to technical solution and standards and technology, then everybody knows that we are not alone in the world, and that there are solutions, and maybe and also countries in Germany like the northern states, which are far in front of us and have so much more expertise and experiences in that. So I really hope and put my thumbs together that they will look at international corporations.
Okay, thank you, Anja, for the great presentation. Also, comments for the questions. So we will move forward, and let's go to the panel discussion part of the event. So now we are introducing the panelists. First, we hear individual presentation from each of our panelists, and then you can ask some questions, and if we have some time, we can take it after the presentation. But at least when we start the panel with Dale, then there is a possibility to talk about different aspects of the panelist. So Kalle Huhtala is our EduCloud Alliance representative. Kalle has been working with digital learning business, content production, and end users since late 90s. His areas of interest are visual storytelling, learning design, gamification, collaboration, and learning analytics. Kalle believes that motivation and interaction are main ingredients of effective learning. And the topic of the speech is XAPI as a part of a national digital learning infrastructure. So please, Kalle, we are happy to hear your presentation.
Thank you, Timo. Vielen Dank, Anja. It's my time to tell you about an example of open technology, open approach to learning technology. I'm talking from an island in the western coast of Finland, from our summer place, and this happens to be the same house in which I started learning to program Commodore 64 with basic language back in the early 80s. So time has gone by and technology has developed. We have grown more experienced, and this is a great time to be alive and working in EdTech world and sector. Not to mention the past year or so with the pandemic hitting us all, but also giving a kick to this kind of digital learning and all technology and effort related to that. The title of my presentation in more detail is The Least Common Denominator, and it's a practical example of applying the XAPI standard within the EduCloud Alliance here in Finland. And as Timo presented the EduCloud Alliance, this is a group of companies and organizations promoting the open ecosystem of digital learning. We are building the building blocks of national education infrastructure. National in a way that most of and many of these education related things, at least in the basic education, are quite nationwide, but also restricted within nations. As Anja also mentioned, most countries want to develop their own educational systems, and some topics are quite difficult to move abroad. Others are easier, like mathematics and other STEM kind of topics. But still, even though education is sort of national thing, I think we also should try to reach out and find these at least common tools and platforms and technologies. And there, the open technologies, open source, open standards, APIs, and so on, definitely give us a possibility to benefit from this, even within national scale, when learning providers and publishers and companies should work together to get some kind of benefit from interoperability. In this case, we have been studying the use of the XAPI standard, the experience API developed States, and what XAPI is, if you are not aware of that already. It's a kind of language to transmit learning and experience related messages between different systems. It's kind of like blood flowing between the head and the heart and the lungs, which otherwise couldn't talk to each other, or the nervous system sending messages around. And the XAPI messages, here's an example of one. They consist of actors, verbs, objects, and related information. And here is an example that tells in human language that somebody named Sally has attended to a solo hang gliding lesson, which has been a part of a course that was organized by the hang gliding school. and taught by Irene, the instructor. And on the left, you can see this in machine language format that databases and learning management systems understand. What's maybe revolutionary or different in this approach to the way things were done earlier is that this language is standard, and the idea is that all learning management system and other application providers could use this language to record learning related actions and data. Plus, not only keeping them in their own databases, but to be able to send them out from their systems. For example, Moodle, the very common learning management system, can send out these XAPI messages out from its own system. So we are opening the sort of cans of worms that contain all the information and putting those worms in a bigger bucket so that they are interoperable and commonly understood. And the XAPI standard is open and available, and it has been around already for several years, so it's nothing new in that way. But it seems that here within at least basic education, digital learning solutions, it is not that widely used. And in Finland, we are just experimenting with this. Some other systems in professional training in companies already use this quite a lot, so it's a proven technology. How learning performance data flows in this our demo environment and pilot idea is first starting here from the left. There are learners and teachers who utilize digital learning materials that various companies provide. In Finland, in this EduCloud Alliance, we have the major publishers in Finland who produce the learning materials for basic education, and also other learning application companies participating. And so far, everyone has had their proprietary format for data and have not shared that with anybody else. Now the idea is that we share that performance data with everybody else, or at least the learning provider, municipalities and schools that organize learning. And here we have books, and we have ebooks, and we have different kinds of games and things that should be able to give standard format information that is then funneled in XAPI format in messages that consist of the verbs, of common metadata related to the learning material, which level that is, what is the topic of the learning material, which group is it aimed at, what are its learning objectives, that kind of metadata. There also goes the learner ID to identify the learner as far as it's needed, and other relevant information like timestamp when the learning event has occurred and so on. All this data is funneled into the learning record store, which is a place to hold all that data in comparable XAPI format. So it comes from various applications and it will be compatible with each other. So it's sort of uniform data instead of proprietary formats. Now from the LRS, it's possible to bring out reports for the school organization, for the teachers, for parents, and to the learners themselves, and reports in various formats that make learning more effective and informative and help all these stakeholders in their everyday life, work, and studies. So this is basically the idea, and it's quite revolutionary in the way that earlier this kind of information really has been held tight. Nobody has wanted to tell that and give that to outside organizations, but with the digital age, it's possible and it's almost required, and it's the only way to make learning more effective and even fun. The title of my presentation was The Least Common Denominator, and that means that as these different companies are working together, we have wanted to find out the least information that we want to export from our systems due to many reasons, competition, information security, and only just to make it work. XAPI standard has a lot of these learning related verbs, and it's possible to create your own verbs also. And in our work during the last year, we have gone through these verbs and discussed and selected so far a bit over a dozen verbs that we are working with, and they all relate to learning activities. The list of the verbs actually is here on the left, and here on the right you can see two case stories. The first one is about Lisa, the student who uses her digital learning environment and materials to learn, and Pekka, the teacher, who uses the system to teach and evaluate learning results. One good thing that we have in Finland is the MPAS authentication, which makes it possible for people to log into different service providers without remembering different credentials to all systems. So that's one first good step that we have in the digital learning infrastructure here in Finland. So these verbs are selected, and they should describe most of the events in the learning process. We were talking a lot about how many of these verbs are needed and which are really needed. This is the resulting list. And also still we are discussing that these verbs may be a little bit too granular on a log kind of level. Should there be some kind of logical level also for handling bigger elements of learning, like a course, how these should be reported by the systems and how they would be compatible with each other. But that's an ongoing work, and we are quite happy with this result so far. So what's in it for the participating organizations, companies, and end users? The learner will get more information and support quicker and easier, meaning the students. The learning providers, schools, municipalities, and so on, can work easier and more effectively when organizing learning, and they can also predict things that are happening, help people in danger of dropping out of studies and so on. The content provider, meaning the publishers and edtech companies, will benefit from the national digital learning infrastructure and this common language to report things. It will be an asset in competing in offers for selling learning products, as that's one important point here. And on national level, if we succeed in this, we get to act as a showcase of digitalization of learning, which is a good target to shoot for. But there needs to be a humble approach. What kind of data and how much do we want and can collect because of the information security, data privacy, different kinds of agreements there. So there's a technical level, and there's definitely a legal level and ethical level in this kind of data collection. We have found the least common denominator in the list on the previous slide. We know that XAPI is not rocket science. It's already in use in many places. And for all the participating organizations, this is extra work that we do for the common good, so that everybody could benefit from it in the long run. And we don't want to panic. Baby steps will take us there instead of making a quick and dirty kind of pilot in big scale. The next steps will be finishing this verb pool document, the selection of verbs that we have, to describe them in more detail so that everybody can use them interoperably. We also have a national metadata model that we are going through and selecting from there the most usable items that we need to describe the learning content. There will be a technical pilot built out of a learning resource database, including our vendor systems that will be modified to support this and include metadata in the learning content and generating sample reports out of the LRS. This should happen in about a year's scale from now, if possible. And we will publish the results and expand the cooperation to include others who are not with us yet. So this was my presentation about one practical application of open technologies in the learning environment. And I would still like to remind that we have all the major publishers in this effort in Finland, so it's really a nice nationwide result when it gets running. So we are happy to be working on this and waiting to see that it comes to success.
Thank you, Kalle, for also a very interesting presentation. Do anyone have a short question here? We can take one if somebody has some urgent ideas that want to ask from Kalle right away after presentation. Okay, please save the questions for the panel with Dale, and we go forward with the next presentation. That will be from Jim Larimore from the Reed Labs. So Jim is the Chief Officer for Equity in Learning at Reed Labs, where he leads strategy programs and partnerships to leverage Reed's strengths in artificial intelligence to close gaps in educational opportunity achievement and student success. The topic of the speech is open technology in education. So please, Jim, we are happy to hear your presentation.
Great, thank you, Timo. So let me start by telling you how Reed Labs came to have 3 I's in the middle of our name, which is quite an unusual spelling in any language. Our parent company, Reed, is based in South Korea, and our founder's aspiration, his North Star for guidance, is to use artificial intelligence to remove inequality, inefficiency, and inconsistency from education. So remove inequality, inefficiency, and inconsistency. That's what the 3 I's in our name remind us to focus on every day. Let's see if I can master the navigation here. When we look at education and inequality around the world, we start with the assumption that talent and potential are pretty evenly distributed across the world's population, but that opportunity is not, and quality education is not. And the data tells us that countries that have invested more equitably in public education have maintained or increased social mobility, leading to economic growth, productivity gains, social stability, and increased capacity for innovation. We recognize that equity in learning is an issue in every nation, but that there may be different challenges and obstacles in different places. In some Asian countries, there's an overheated reliance on private education, expensive private tutors, and so on. In the United States, income inequality and unequal school funding based on our reliance on local taxes to pay for local schools has created a system of deep structural inequality. In Africa and Latin America, we see that more than 50% of students fail to meet minimum standards in subjects such as math and reading. And the COVID pandemic has made things even more challenging. Excuse me. Those fortunate enough to be born into more privileged families generally have access to supports and resources that others cannot even imagine. And where inequalities exist in our schools, the poor find themselves trying to climb a series of broken, even disconnected ladders to reach a goal that can seem beyond their reach, no matter how hard they try. At Reed, we believe that technology can be used to help close gaps in equity, opportunity, and achievement. Our strategy as a company is to serve as a field catalyst, working with other companies, other organizations, to organize a collaborative marketplace for ideas, standards, and a framework for action, bringing together innovators, educators who are committed to equity and improvement, and funders and influence in society. Our goal is to bring together a diverse cross-sector group of actors to identify and overcome obstacles to our progress and to correct for failures in the current marketplace. And in the world of AI, one of the biggest obstacles is access to large amounts of high-quality education data, which is why in 2020, we used Reed's data to create the EdNet dataset and made it publicly available. EdNet is the largest publicly available hierarchical education dataset in the world, 20 times larger than the assessments dataset that was previously the largest. And if a small startup company can do this, we hope that others will follow suit and join us so that we can work together to accelerate growth in the use of AI to drive improvements in learning. The EdNet dataset includes data on more than 1 million learners based on RED's original work in Korea, which is now extended into Japan, and has more than 130 million learner interactions in the dataset. And last fall, we leveraged this dataset excuse me, for a competition hosted on Google's Kaggle competition platform. Working with partners like the DXtera Institute, our initial hope was to attract at least 1,000 competitors from the global AI talent pool to work with our data. And when the competition ended in December, after 4 months, we were surprised. The RED AI Ed Challenge had attracted more than 4,000 competitors on more than 3,000 teams from more than 100 countries around the planet, proving to us that global AI talent can be engaged in addressing challenges in education if we can provide access to data and focus AI talent on the problems and challenges that will lead to improvements. So our next step in February 2021, as you'll see on the right side of the slide, was to host a day-long special workshop as part of the annual Association for the Advancement of AI conference. That workshop brought together about 300 innovative educators, representatives from companies, AI researchers, and funders, all in the purpose or for the purpose of increasing our understanding of challenges in education that need attention, and to advance the cross-sector conversations about things like data standards, data security, privacy, data access and interoperability, and how to use AI responsibly in order to meet the challenges in the educational world and to harness the potential of new technologies to be used for the greater good. I've kept my comments brief today in hopes that we can have more time for discussion and questions and answers later, but I would like to close by just saying I'm honored to be with you all today and to think together about ways that open data can spur the market to innovate and create the tools that are so desperately needed in our schools. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you all today.
Thank you, Jim, for the presentation. This AI is always very interesting, and data sets linked to that are extremely interesting, and I think that those will be a very important part of the EdTech future. So thank you.
Yeah.
All right. I think that we will move to the next presentation. That will be from Jeff Merriman. So, Jeff is a DXtera's co-founder and chief technology officer that brings 35 years of rich experience in educational innovation, collaborative leadership to the DXtera Institute. And Jeff oversees technical strategy, design, and development related to the DXtera consortium. And topic of the Jeff's speech is importance of open data infrastructure and data sets. So please, Jeff, we are happy to hear your presentation.
Okay, thank you. Thank you everyone for joining us. I sort of paraphrased my title here to opening authentic data. So there seems to be a theme here around maybe not so much open technologies, but open data, open verbs and nouns, and the kind of things that we need to better understand what students are doing, how they're learning, and how to better facilitate that. So I'm going to continue that theme a little bit here as well. At DXtera, we are steeped in open. We develop all of our technologies. First of all, just mentioned that DXtera is a membership organization, a nonprofit. We focus on helping our members and others to make better use of information through better integration, through next generation infrastructure, and better data management. And to do that, we use open specifications and standards all the time. Foundational to our work are a set of specifications and data models called the Open Service Interface Definitions. If you go to our website, you can find information about that. We develop on open technologies, and everything we develop is also made available through open licensing. So again, we're all about open when it comes to our technology. But I'm going to talk more about what we're doing with data. So one of our solutions that we have developed with our members is our data management suite of applications. It's really focused on helping an educational organization to make better use, to orchestrate data across multiple disparate systems in their environment for the purposes of integration, for the purposes of data management, data reporting, supporting AI, whatever that might be, and also for integrating with third-party systems. So the things in blue here are basically technologies that we've built along with our members, including an integration framework, an enterprise data hub that's really an operational data store that an educational enterprise can use to orchestrate and make better use of the data coming from disparate systems, and data warehouse technologies for helping to do basic reporting and analytics of data. And as you can see from the sort of data silos on the left side there, we don't limit ourselves to just educational data. We work with organizations around other kinds of data coming from other kinds of administrative systems, HR, finance, in addition to learning systems and student information systems and whatnot. And basically what we're doing is we're helping organizations to take the proprietary data models from the silos and bring them into a normalized open data model that's published that you can find when you go to DXtera's website. That helps organizations to really get a better handle on data. And if you look at the kind of things that we can deal with, and this is a subset, the kinds of information we can bring together for the purposes of supporting next generation applications and analytics, it's everything, it includes everything about curriculum, courses and terms and programs, all the things being taught at an organization, the credentials people can get through that organization, assessments they might take. It includes information about particular students and their activities for registering for courses, for enrolling in programs, for taking assessments. This data might come from student systems, it might come from LMSs, it might come from assessment systems, but it basically gets normalized and available for analysis. The learning objectives available that are being taught, people's competencies if those are available, and then everything through the actual academic records, the courses that students have taken or failed, the programs that they've been enrolled in or changed, credentials they've gotten, assessment results, and whatnot. So a lot of information, and it's very powerful, but it's also, I'm going to turn it red here, it's also real data, and we've heard a lot already about security and the need for dealing with personally identifiable information. Obviously, we all have very good laws in place to help assure that student data is safe. And so this data is very sensitive. There's also a lot of it. So at a typical institution, we might work with say 25,000 students. This runs into tens of millions of records very easily. We were just doing a back of the envelope calculation yesterday for one of our schools that had 25,000 students. We know we had at least 25 to 30 million records available over the course of, in the case of this one institution, 7 years. So 7 years of student information, 20 to 30 million records. It's all really, really interesting data that the institution can act upon. And it's highly authentic in that it represents real people, real people doing real things, enrolling in a degree program, taking courses toward that program, maybe failing some courses, leaving the organization for a while to rethink their life's choices, coming back and maybe enrolling in a different program. All the things that those of us involved in education know are sort of or who've actually learned know is the typical sort of pathway. It's very chaotic, and the real data captures all that chaos and captures a lot of chaos across a lot of students. I'm going to move that over there because one thing we're looking at, and in fact with RID Labs have been investigating, is what this means for AI tools, and using the term, the acronym AI a little broadly. Traditional AI, machine learning, predictive analytics tools, the kinds of things that, the kinds of tools that an educational organization or an individual might want to use to understand academic progress, and what are the kinds of interventions that might help a student to move from a pathway that isn't working for them toward a pathway that might work better. And to date, these tools, they really need to work with real data. And it's because of that high authenticity. If you're going to train an AI tool, it needs to know about all the kinds of experiences that students have had over the course of many years, so it can train its algorithms to then predict what a contemporary student might do based on their activity. And obviously then AI tools can be developed to act on that real data to provide information for academic advisors, decision makers at institutions, or the students themselves, as to an approach they might take to alter their pathway. The problem with this is that for those people developing AI tools, that could be startup companies, it could be researchers in education, it could be a number of kinds of people. For those people and organizations trying to develop AI tools, it really creates a significant barrier to entry. Jim talked about open data, the ability to have open data sets to help develop your tool, to help make sure it's going to work and do the things you claim it's going to do, to be able to test it in many different environments. And because of the high risk involved in this data from a security and privacy perspective, that barrier to entry is very high for the educational AI or predictive analytics marketplace. The typical company in this space really has to develop a relationship with an educational enterprise, whether that's a school district or a higher education institution or a system or what have you. Those relationships kind of need to be in place before you can even begin to test and train your AI tool to begin with. So not a lot of companies can get involved in this space. You see a lot of companies that come out of research groups in educational organizations because those research groups at that institution already had an in. They're already able to get access to data. So what we've been talking about a lot lately is how can we increase open access to, let's call it, authentic data. So and there's a couple techniques one can use to do this, and one is or that we can imagine using to do this. They haven't really been tested much so far. One is, can we transform real data into anonymized data? Can we use anonymization techniques? Can we use encryption techniques, homomorphic encryption, what have you, to create open data that represents the high authenticity of a real data environment, like an educational enterprise, for the purposes of allowing AI tool developers to train, to test. It allows organizations like DXtera and RID Labs to do challenges based on this kind of data, to encourage research and development in the AI and analytics space. And is that something we could do? Are the techniques available to do that in a way that we can trust? So is we believe we can create highly authentic data based on anonymization and encryption, but do we trust that data would really be safe if it was in the wild, as it were, and available to AI developers and researchers to play with? The other thing we've looked at is synthetic data. To what extent can what we would know about real data, can we synthesize data sets, maybe in conjunction with anonymized data, to create much lower risk data sources? The issue there that we've obviously run into is authenticity. trying to synthesize authentic data that looks like thousands of students going through academic programs over the course of a number of years is very, very difficult based on the apparent chaos of what that all looks like. So we can't imagine really that we could create synthetic data that was able to effectively train and test and demonstrate AI tool functionality because of that low authenticity. But it's something we want to look at and try to figure out, to what extent that might be possible, or some combination of these might be possible. So, can we increase trust that anonymized data in the wild is safe? Could we possibly increase authenticity around synthetic data for the purpose of testing, training, and developing AI tools? And these are questions that DXtera, along with many of our partners, Red Labs being one of the primary motivators in this space, have started to look at. So we've created AI Alliance within the DXtera Institute. And it was about a year ago that we launched that. And the focus of the AI Alliance, a subset of our DXtera members who are critically interested in these issues, is to identify what we can do. What is the research that we can create? What are innovations that we could develop in sort of a laboratory environment? How do we develop open infrastructure that could be used for these kinds of purposes? And what can we do to spur innovation in AI development and deployment for education? So I'll leave by saying that if you're interested in this topic, feel free to contact us at DXtera. We'd love to increase the conversation around these issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. There's a lot of possibilities in here, so please contact Jeff if you have any interest of making cooperation with this area. So now we have all heard the panelists, and now our moderator, Tay Allen, who is the president and co-founder of DXtera Institute and leads strategic direction to remove digital integration barriers for education and workforce institutions and international consortium members. He is an innovator who has unique ability to lead dynamic collaboratives to transform delivery of education and spur economic vibrancy. So please, Dale, take reign for the panel, and I ask all the members of the conference to ask questions and also participate to the panel. So please, Dale, go ahead.
Great, thank you, Timo, and thank you to all of our panelists, our keynote, Anya, and our collaborative team that puts together this Next Generation by Design Symposium series throughout the year, where we have events like today, which are chances for us to get together with colleagues around the world to talk about key topic areas of interest that really are things that are preventing us from optimizing education delivery or solving a specific problem. We're always interested, and I know in the chat that Timo, you put in about your course orator. There are innovative ideas that are out there that we are always looking to collaborate with. So there'll be an email address at the end that you can connect with us directly and link in with this collective team. I would ask people to place questions right in the chat function. I know we have a chat and a Q&A, but let's use the chat just so we don't have to bounce back around. But there was a question that had come in. I'll try to facilitate some questions here as we go forward to conclusion. There was one question that came in the Q&A function from Chavi for Kali specifically. And so, Kali, if I could call on you, actually, can I call on all of the panelists and keynotes to join back in on video? So have everybody up on the screen at once, and that way we can all join in and answer questions going forward. But specifically, there was a question that came in for Kali about what was your approach, taking into account the amount of actors involved in the project, to define that verb set, especially those outside of the XAPI spec, as well as other fields, content, auxiliary entities, etc. So if you need additional clarity, Chavi will put it in the chat, but that was the general question, Kali, if you want to try to take a stab at that.
Well, our approach was to find, as I said, the least common denominator. So we were not expanding on all possible elements of technologies available. XAPI has been one that has been very much in the field and open to us. And in this group of companies and organizations that we have in EduCloud Alliance, we decided to concentrate on that and first find out the selection of those verbs. As I said, we have different organizations competing with each other, but still trying to find a way to also work together. So this way to find at least something that everybody can share safely together is the starting point. And this common language for transmitting the learning activities is the first step in this. As I mentioned also, we have the metadata model. Metadata is maybe a lot of more work than this common language, because metadata is means a lot of work for content producers. All the content needs to be addressed and given correct metadata. So how to give it correctly, how to make sure it covers everything and is also interoperable is the next step that we are working on. There are language issues. Should we use our own language? Should it be English or some other common way to describe things? A lot of things to talk and discuss about. So I hope I did answer some of the question. I maybe didn't get all of it, but as I said, moving on by baby steps.
Great, I appreciate it. And Chavi, if he did not answer your question completely, feel free to go right back into chat and add additional. We'll all look at it and join in to that. I had just put together some prompt questions in advance, and again, we can add to these and we'll extend. So I'll ask all of the group, and I'll ask Timo to join back in too if you're not, if you haven't come back on the screen. You can be one of our participants here as well. So we got one submission of an example of another open technology that's in play that is being developed over in, with a university, I think in Finland, but it may be in another country, with Courserator. But for our panelists, you each spoke about specific items, but are there other examples that you think about as open technologies that have been brought forth into the marketplace that have had an impact? You know, just maybe an example that you think is another example you think is important that you'd like to share or highlight. I could start with something, and it's something that at least in the U.S. is just starting to come, quote, to the market, and this is around openly published job skills, competencies, learning outcome models. So I think you know, most people doing work and research in education space understand that that educational activities really revolve around the development of skills, the development and pursuit of learning outcomes, and developing competencies and proficiencies across those outcomes. And at least in the U.S., the Open Skills Network is one organization I'm thinking of that's really beginning to try to develop more open sets of this kind of data that can be linked, cross-linked, that can be turned into educational pathways and the like. Of course, a lot of us driving this today is our activities around shareable learner records and badges that need to be linked to something to skills models that we can all understand as humans, but also as computer algorithms are developed. So I think that's one thing that
I'm really excited to see all the activity in that space, and something that we're trying to better support as we move forward as well.
Yeah,
Great, thank you. Who else on the team?
Just to piggyback on Jeff's comments, I think there is this ecosystem of open source material that's out there now as well. So in addition to the kind of things that Jeff mentioned, when we started off with the open educational resource kind of movement, so there's been a proliferation of now more carefully curated OER content that's available. There are university initiatives that have spun off into companies like OpenStax at Rice University, which is really pioneering the compilation of materials so that there can be, in effect, free textbooks to help bring down the cost of education much more broadly. And then like DXtera, which I really view as kind of playing across this very broad ecosystem in the K-12 area, there are our friends at Innovate EDU, which are trying to do some of the same types of things. And now we're really starting to get some traction in looking at students who have different disabilities or accessibility needs to make sure that their interests and needs are represented in these technology movements as well.
Great, thank you. I dropped those links for both of those that were referenced in the chat for people. Kale or Anya, are there other examples you'd like to highlight that were mentioned about open technologies that you think have been important in your work? And that's okay if there's not. I'm kind of putting you on the spot there. So
yeah, well, I hope that the information security and the kind of my data approach when a lot of information is going out there. I think, was it Jeff who mentioned that 25 million items of data would be stored for 25,000 students over the years. That would mean, if I calculated correctly, at least 1,000 items per person. So I hope there will be an access for people to their own data and more control over what they give and what is taken of them. Even though the systems to control that, like the cookies information and that kind of systems are oftentimes also annoying and difficult to control, really. That is an area where I think open approach is very important and should be taken more into consideration in the future.
All right, thank you. So security and managing security and privacy is critical. And again, with both regulation and just from a personal standpoint, that we think that's really important to have pieces there. So let me shift. And then the second question I kind of put on, and you kind of started to get to it, Kale, a little bit is, and maybe Anya, you've given an example of what Germany is doing from a national level here already, but I'll ask the others on the panel first, is, what is needed to support the development of or use of more open educational solutions in the market? Again, and maybe the panelists can reflect on Anya's example of Germany as it relates to that, or if there's any reflection there. So, Kale, maybe I can call on you first, and then we'll go to Jim and then Jeff, just to give any thoughts on what's needed in the marketplace, or what your perception is of what Germany is doing.
I think this, open standards, open examples of building interoperable solutions are important, because it's the only way to get solutions and content to spread. Open educational solutions, even though they would be developed by companies that sell these solutions, it's the only way to make them interoperable. So I think the approach that we are having now nationwide, that also is good for the 16 different nations within Germany and all the nations within Europe and even globally. We are moving to big challenges there, but I hope we are not stuck within the national borders, because this is the time to really make learning and information free and available to people.
Yeah, as I've always said, software doesn't seem to understand geographic borders. Jim, can I call on you?
Yeah, sure. I think about this in kind of three different levels, right? So one is, I think there is a need for educator involvement, and especially teacher and school leader involvement. Part partly to inform the industry, the ed tech industry, about what the real challenges are, what the use cases look like, what's needed the most, because I think that there are some issues there. You know, I spent some time as a staff member at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and I was really surprised at how many technology tools were developed in isolation from schools and teachers, based on the innovators' own personal experiences and opinions and perspectives. And I think that is an issue that we need to really think deeply about. And as a career educator, I feel like I don't want to sit on the sidelines and wait for someone to approach me. I think I want to find ways to get educators more assertively positioned and involved. So that's one. The second is that I think, building off of that, there's a real need to have an industry and educator dialogue about what reasonable expectations we should have, what standards are needed, what kinds of benchmarks might be appropriate. And I think that by pressure testing ideas together, we'll probably get it more right at the beginning than we would if we operate in isolation from one another. And then the third piece of this, which I had not really thought about until about 1 month ago, is in response to a report by a group called the Me2B Alliance in the US, which came together and looked, I think they did a basic audit of almost 40 apps that are being used in US schools. And because of the pandemic, many more educational applications flooded into our schools. Schools were looking desperately for solutions, and so they grabbed what they could find. And the audit revealed that about 60% of those apps were sharing data with third parties without the knowledge or consent of the schools or the students and their families. And that's just, simply not right. So I think, and the root cause of this seems to be that the app developers were using software developer kits that were built for the gaming industry or built for other things that are sold through various app stores. Right. So I think we may need to move into open data, into possibly a software developer kit for education that does not include some of those elements that will immediately cause issues around data privacy and data security.
Great, thank you. And Jeff, any additional thoughts for you?
Yeah, and I think Jim sort of Kelly sort of mentioned some of these things, but I think a lot of it is about how to develop sort of a more educated and engaged consumer base, right? So I think that's sort of what the example we just heard. This is all very nascent for a lot of educators. It's even nascent for a lot of systems administrators in educational environments. We just heard yesterday from a major state system in the US that they were just now beginning to develop data access standards for their vendors who are accessing their own data. It feels like something that needs to have happened a long time ago. But I think as these sorts of events that Jim just mentioned happen, I think it's really raising awareness. And the awareness needs to be raised also just around interoperability and ease of integration, and the open standards and specifications that can help with that. One thing we've created with DXtera is our integration scorecard, which is really a tool to help organizations that are developing RFPs to begin to think about what are the critical elements and integration points that they're going to require from their vendors. Not even talking about standards. It's just from a business perspective. How is this new tool going to fit in your environment? What does it need to talk to? And then how is it going to do that? So opening up those conversations, trying to provide more tools to allow people to understand what can be as far as open, what can be as far as interoperability and integration, and to begin to do a better job of demanding that from the vendors that they're talking to.
Yeah, great, thanks. And I put that link in for the integration scorecard, which was DXtera is a community membership organization, and one of the leading members who helped develop that was the Open University of Catalonia. over in lovely Barcelona, but with worldwide impact. But they did it for the same reasons that Jeff just described and others are mentioning. Anya, let me just go to you. And I think we've already answered question 3 kind of throughout this discussion about what are the largest opportunities, but maybe I'll give you a chance to reflect here as we come to conclude, about, what are the largest opportunities and what is needed to support those beyond what Germany's already doing. And maybe that's a chance to kind of wrap unless anyone has other questions that come through the chat. So Anya.
With areas, you mean which kind of areas in the education ecosystem?
Yeah, sure.
I think the big changes they lay in using learning analytics to provide more individual learning. I think this is a very big challenge. We lost so much students during the pandemic because we have all this one-fits-all teaching approach, and with learning and teaching solutions that they could use data to make the teacher a better expert about the children's needs, and to make him more individual offerings. I think this would be the biggest change, I think, in this industry.
Great. Thank you. And I will ask all of the folks that are still present, if you have additional questions, please put them into the chat. Let me just wrap up our session with, again, a thank you to everyone that has been here and has shared with us, from the keynote to the panelists to the other collaborators. The one thing we would like to do, again, this is a symposium series that we do annually. We used to do an in-person, both in the US and Europe annually, and we will get back to that. And we're hopeful that in November, we will be in Germany, in Berlin, with a summit, along with our colleagues at the German Alliance for Education and many others, to continue these topics. We'll have a fall series that goes on, and we are asking all interested parties who want to intentionally design a better ecosystem and open solutions that can be utilized to deliver education to join in with us as non-monetary sponsors of the Next Generation by Design symposium and series. And really what we ask is for you to be engaged, for you to help promote, that we also want to publicize you and your organization and all that we do, and that we can utilize you with a quote and that sort of thing in our materials. And I say our, it's not DXtera Institute, it is everyone that is a collaborator. The lead partners are seen on the bottom of the screen. Then we represent 5 different countries, 6 different countries with our leadership hubs, but that we have an extensive network throughout the world. And then we have many others that are engaged in this process. And so if you are interested, please just shoot us an email. Use the generic info@dextera.org to represent all of us. If you have better connections with RID or with the EduCAD Alliance or the German Alliance, please email them directly, because we all meet together regularly. We have a leadership team and then an advisory group. And we would love for you to join into the advisory group at no financial cost, but a cost of shared time and energy and interest, to continue to spread this notion of creating a next generation intentionally by design that will, again, help optimize education delivery in a safe and secure environment. And I'm going to take one more look through the chat to make sure there are no additional questions that have come in. We do have a questions, Timo Helenis. All right. So the question that came in is, how do you think the traditional schools are able to innovate? And if they are the barrier, what's the solution? So if we think about in each of our respective countries, maybe, are the traditional schools are they able to innovate? And if they're the barrier, what's the solution to help them innovate? And so maybe we'll start with Anya. Maybe if you want to give a quick reaction to that.
I do not think that the schools are as traditional as it seems in this question. I think they have a lot of responsibilities to look for, and maybe in Germany the playing rules are not very clear. So at the moment, privacy is the responsibility of the school, not the privacy of the provider, not the responsibility of the provider. And this is a very big obstacle in the market. And when we say, okay, schools don't have to do this because we have a kind of code of conduct or something like that, that all the providers have to be responsible for data security, then it could be a very push in the market. And the second response is, I think, I don't know of other countries, but I can talk about Germany. What is a lack of a vision. What is this? What are we learning for? Why do we use this modern technology for what kind of learner or student or human being we want to have in the future? And this is a discussion in our society that it will take time. And the pandemic was not a booster for this discussion. It was we have other problems than that.
Okay. All right. Jim, why don't we go to you for quick reaction, and then Kale.
Sure. Yeah, I think about this in a couple different ways, right? One is, where do you, or how do you find and support those teachers who are ready to be the real innovators, and then identify the teachers who may be positioned to be early adopters of change, and because there's an adoption and kind of diffusion thing there to think about. So there are some organizations that focus on teacher networks. In the US, the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Learning is an organization that has paid a lot of attention to this under the rubric of what they now refer to as improvement science, right? How do you test something out with a group that's ready to test it out, and then as you refine things, share that out.
Jim, you're breaking up on us. I don't know if Kale, you can maybe jump in
at the school.
Jim, you're breaking up. I don't know if you can hear us, but you're breaking up.
Okay, yeah, I can hear you, but yeah, I think the internet connection in Iowa may be a little tricky.
That's right. We have at least we got 3 countries here on the screen, and it's amazing what we can do with technology, but it doesn't always work great. Let me go to Kale to give him a chance to respond, and then I think we're all set with questions.
Yeah. So how the question was how schools can be more innovative and how to help them.
Yeah.
I think the teachers themselves have a lot of work to do, and they are very different kinds of persons in the way they do their work. They are also given a lot of freedom to do their work in our schools, and some of them are more interested in using technology and new means, and some are not that interested. Some of maybe the best EdTech ideas and solutions come from teachers that have the teaching background. Then there are companies or startups that don't have that background and have an idea and try to bring it to school. So I think it would be important to somehow bridge the gap between the school world to make it more easy to pilot things with students, maybe to embrace the teachers with ideas easier in the EdTech scene, or give them more hands-on approach and help to turn their maybe nascent ideas into pilots and products. There may be that kind of a gap between the makers of things and the ideators of things, teachers and companies. So that kind of bridge should be built.
That's great. That's great. So why don't we end there, seeing no additional questions. Jim posted a response back about some of the innovation network examples in the U.S. with K-12 schools that may be, Timo, for you to look at. But again, I want to say thank you to all of our keynote, our panelists, our collaborating partners who helped put on the Next Generation by Design session, and most importantly, those who have attended. Please do stay in touch with us, again, either directly through the individual organizations or at the info@dxtera.org site. We look forward to continuing these series and symposium on an annual basis with folks, and reach out to us. But I hope you have a great evening or day, depending on where you're located. So thank you very much, all. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.